That's fine. Okay, so we have 5 people that are watching. Just to kind of, sorry, I need to go back. We have 6 that are watching. Just to let you know, if you are watching, we have Noel Bostic here. He is here in person, 6 feet away, social distancing, representing Rising Sun. Online, we do have Alex Brewer and Marcia representing Rod. We have Lynn Gosser representing Batesville. We have Ryan Middleton from Jacksonville, Eric Lowe's from South Dearborn on the phone. We also have Andrew Jackson from Summon Dearborn. We do have a few members that were unable to participate today. We are possibly, Mrs. Rogers from Milan may jump in as we're going along. And actually, as we said that, Jane is jumping in. So welcome, Jane. We just started the link and just started the meeting, kind of welcoming everybody. I was letting everybody know you'll see everybody online, Jane, as part of our meeting. I have Noel Bostic here in person with us representing Rising Sun. And what I'm going to do,
thank you, Carl.
I'm going to give you that just in case if you need to talk to that one. Thanks, Carl. Okay, I want to give a mic to Noel just in case he had some lightning words to share during the meeting for all of us. So, well, I appreciate everyone joining again online here. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is approval of the agenda items. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda items?
I'll make that motion.
We have Jane Rogers making the motion. Do I have a second? Can you, Eric, you'll have to unmute.
Second.
Eric Lowe seconds the motion. Is there anything, Alex, that needed to be added or revised to the agenda?
No, I did send a revised out previous, so you will have the addition of the update on our relocation. So that was in the last agenda.
Good, good. Is there any board members that had anything you needed to add or wanted to request a revision? Okay, hearing none, then all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us into our consent items. Consent items, the first one in consent items is approval of the minutes for the May 19th, 2020 ROD board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the May 19th board minutes?
This is Ryan, so moved.
Ryan Middleton from Jacksonville makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Eric Lowe's from South Dearborn seconds the motion. Are there any questions? The minutes were included in your packet. Any revisions needed to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes as presented for the May 19th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Second consent item is review of financial report and approval of claims for payment. Marcia or Alex, do you want to review the financial report? One of you can unmute. There you go.
Okay. So the federal reimbursement request was included in the Google Drive packet that we sent out yesterday. And I just wanted to let you know that this will be expended by the end of June. The semi-annual certification forms, I actually emailed those to you separately yesterday. And if you did not receive that, please let me know and I'll send it again. But you need to sign these and keep it with your federal grant information because the auditors do check on that when they come up. I needed to let you know that our projected cash balance will be approximately $1,515,000 at the end of June. And then also any of our forms that need signatures, I'll be sending to you via Blue Ink again, as I've done in the past. And then on separation agreement amounts were included for Summit, Dearborn, and Batesville.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Did I hear, Marcia, did you say, so at the end of June, you're estimating that balance to be $1,515,000? Was that the number?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the financial report for Marcia or Alex? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the claims as presented?
Carl, this is Jane. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers from Milan makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Eric Lowe's from South Dearborn seconds the motion. Are there any questions for Marcia or Alex on the claims? As she kind of mentioned, you've got the software systems, Midwest data, a couple items that aren't necessarily typical, but at this time of the year they are. Other questions for Marcia or Alex? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Claims are approved. Thank you. That moves us on to action items. The first one under action items is personnel update. Alex, do you, let me go ahead and you want to go ahead and talk about them, and then I'll get a motion to approve. Alex, do you want to go ahead and share?
Sure, we have resignations and transfers to acknowledge. We have resignations for Brooke Level, Assistant Director, and Tricia Goldsmith, Educational Consultant. We have transfers to Summit Dearborn as part of our reorganization. Judy Hagedorn, Devin Cook, Dale Bullwine, and Lori Trimble. And then I do want to say to each of these folks, thank you for your service to Rod. We are going to miss you. We really appreciate the work that you've done. We wish you the very best in your new positions, and don't be strangers. And we'll see you down the road, I guess. So I wanted to say thank you to them.
Good. Thank you. So you've heard the personnel update on resignations and job transfers. Do I have a motion to approve those resignations and transfers?
So moved.
Eric Lowe's makes a motion, and Ryan Middleton from Jacksonville seconds the motion. Do we have any questions for Alex on personnel updates? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Thank you. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. And again, I do want to also echo what Alex has shared, that we want to wish the best for all of those employees, whether they are moving on to other positions in other corporations or transferring to Summit Dearborn. So we do want to thank you for your service. I know Brooke worked extensively at Lawrenceburg, so I do want to thank Brooke personally for her service and being able to help us over the years. And then Tricia, Judy, Kevin, Dale, and Lori also wish them the best as they are transferring to Summit Dearborn. So wish them all the best of luck. So thank you. Moving on to our second action item is adoption of the new interlocal agreement. Do I have a motion to approve the adoption of the new interlocal agreement?
This is Jane, so moved.
Jane Rogers makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Eric Lowe's seconds the motion. Alex, do you want to go ahead and talk about this?
The only change on this at this time is the membership. I think as we get into next school year and we talk about Rod moving forward in the future, this is the document that we will make adjustmts to or changes as we look towards the future. So it was a late addition to the packet, but everybody does now have a copy of the previous. One question that I have, and I haven't gotten an answer back yet from Susan, that I'm going to follow up with her, is how we go about, I guess, finalizing this, because when we initially did the interlocal agreement, your boards and a sign. I'm not sure if we'll need to do that just to make an amendment to it to change the membership or not. So that's something I'll follow back up with each of you on is how we go about finalizing that with your board. So I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you, Alex. That's a good point, because that was going to be the question I was going to ask was, did we need each of us to adopt that? So we'll wait for you to provide that. So really the only change are names going from the 8 to the 6 in this document.
Correct.
Okay. Hearing that, are there any other specific questions for Alex on the adoption of the new interlocal agreement? Hearing none then, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion carries. Takes us to our third action item, presentation and recommendation for approval of the IDEA 611, 619, and local budgets. So I will turn it over at this time to Alex and Marcia to present those, and then we will take some motions.
Okay, so where I want to start, and please, if you've got questions, you may need to interrupt and ask those as we go, because what I'm going to do is share my screen with you so that you can kind of see as I'm walking through. What I want to do is, I shared a presentation with you, which goes through each of the budgets. We're going to start with the federal, and then we'll move into the local. And if you'd like, I can switch over to the local. And I know it's the same format that you've seen in the past, but it is kind of tricky because I know you don't look at it all the time. And it has the tabs, and you scroll across, and then they kind of circle back 2 tabs for the totals. We'll go through the presentation, and then if you'd like to get into the weeds a little bit more, I'm happy to then pull up that individual budget. But I think the presentation does hit the highlights and the important pieces for us. So I'm going to share my screen.
And everyone, for all the members, you had included as a PowerPoint presentation. It was included in your packets. So in your packets, Alex included that.
Sharing my screen now.
Yes, it's being shared. You're good, Alex.
Good deal. All right. Presentation button.
It's good.
Okay. So we're gonna. This is, I guess, the order. We'll go through the 2 federal grants first. Those are pretty simple for us, and then we'll go through the local budget. I've given you some options on the funding, which would be that number 4, which is the cash balance. It's not so much of a review as it is just deciding which direction you want to go. So just I'm going to jump in and start first by talking about some of our special education numbers. I guess there's some disclaimer here. Some of my number, and I'll try to be clear about whether I'm speaking to just our 6 remaining districts and pulling those numbers, and when I'm looking at the numbers that would include Sutton, Dearborn, and Batesville. Where I was able to, I pulled them apart so that we can look at projecting forward. But then there's a couple spots where I used the whole co-op number. So Marcia, you're next to me, so if I'm not clear, you can kind of yell at me and tell me to be specific there. But this first slide shows our total special education child count numbers. This is not specific to only the ROD-funded positions, or I'm sorry, not positions, but disability areas. As you know, we fund ABC on particular eligibility categories. This is overall, and so on the right you can see the increase and decrease in terms of those numbers, and that's an overall number. So overall, we have 4% this is the change in the APC funding that goes into the formula for our local budget. I think this is important to think about, because when we look at when we get to the local budget and we look at where there are increases and decreases, this is a major driver of those increases and decreases, because this is a big part of the formula. So I wanted to share that. Another thing I want to just touch on here is and actually I put some, when I pull this, because I put some notes into the slide notes. But based on, I'm going to speak to numbers overall, which would include Sutton and Batesville. But we had rod reimbursed areas. There were 60 more students. And usually when we look at increases over the last several years, we've had increases in the areas of rod funding, and not in areas that stayed with the school districts. That is, we've had lower numbers or flat numbers of students identified with specific learning disabilities and mild cognitive disabilities, while we've had increases in students with other health impairment and autism spectrum disorder, which is consistent with numbers across the state. This past year, we did still see that. However, unlike last year's, the majority of the increases in special ed students, which would be that first slide that I showed, those were in eligibility areas that stay at the local schools. And there's really one area that you could point to, and that is the change in the developmental delay. Now that carries over into school age, we had a 50% increase in students who had developmental delay classification. So that went from 99 students to 151, and that's including some of Dearborn and Batesville. So that is funded at the mild or tier 2 level, and that fund, those funds that those students generated are staying at the Schools for Your Mild Disabilities programming. And so this is the first year, because of the extension in the developmental delay, that we've had increases in the mild disabilities that have outpaced, I guess you could say, the increases in the disability categories that fund ROD. So we are, and of course we still service those students who have developmental delays. At some point they will either become, they will be reevaluated. Hopefully a good number of them will be dismissed. Some will continue on in special education with different eligibility categories. And it's a good thing that the state did in allowing us to keep servicing these students, not dismissing them coming out of preschool. They still had special education needs, and we were able to get some funding to continue providing those services. And at some point, we evaluate them, and they will go into different eligibility categories or possibly be dismissed from special education. So this is the first year we've seen the developmental delay numbers impacted from that rules change for the eligibility. So I wanted to highlight that to you. That doesn't get captured in our budget, because that delay is not a eligibility category that is our APC formula, but it certainly is part of what we can do in terms of evaluations. And there are kids that have some pretty significant needs with that classification, but it was a little too early to be able to know it was maybe a or a different classification. So it's good that we're able to continue servicing them without having to prematurely give them a eligibility classification. So I wanted to share that. That's something that you will see in your That's a little summary of the numbers. Let's talk about our federal grants. The 619 is our preschool age grant, and previous grant was $80,472, and that does exclude Southern Dearborn and Batesville, so that we can look at an apples to apples here. The current grant is for $80,549, so that grant is pretty level with what it was last year. Both of these grants we are proposing to fund them pretty similarly to how we did this past year, which is to only keep transfer costs on the federal grants, and then when the grants are expended, then those costs would shift to the local fund. It makes it easy for us to keep track of, and it's not, we don't have to worry about the federal grants being held over year to year, which makes the budgeting process a little more challenging. So I think it was a good change that we did last year, and so we want to keep it. One slight difference this year, because the preschool grant is only $80,000. The only positions we're putting on are the South Dearborn preschool, and then there's a small amount for non-public proportionate share. The other programs would be funded out of the local preschool. So there's only just a couple of positions that are fit onto that grant. Shifting to the school age grant, which is the big grant. Again, this is excluding the Southern Dearborn and Batesville, so we can compare apples to apples. Last year in FY20, it was $2,083,654. This grant is $2,123,550. So it is a slight increase. And the positions that we fund on this grant are the programs, the transfer programs for the intensive academic and the intensive behavior programs, both teachers and paraprofessionals. And we also have non-public proportionate shares, which funds, those are some broad personnel costs that we provide the non-public schools, teacher and services. So both of the grants are in the packet, so that if you want to look and see the specific teachers. But like I kind of mentioned, the plan for this grant, like we did for last year, is to include all of the transfer costs on there, and then when the grant funds are expended, then those transfer costs would shift to the local. And when we get to the local, I will show you where the additional amount for the transfer programs is calculated into the overall local budget. Segue. So this is the slide for the local budget. So these are just some highlights, and like I said, if we want to go into the lines, we can. But what the local budget funds is two things: broad costs, and like I just mentioned, those transfer costs that aren't covered by the 611 and 619. So transfer costs being the reimbursement costs for your programs. Our previous broad budget, 19 and 20, was $2,726,889. The proposed broad budget is $1,796,897. The reduction is because of the reorganization and includes a reduction in just under 9.5 certified positions, 1 administration position, and 2 non-certified positions. The transfer costs, which were not covered by the federal budget, that went from $2.3 million in previous year's budget to $1.5 in this year's budget. So that decrease is because we obviously aren't appropriating funds to cover transfer costs for Batesville and for Southern Dearborn. This is the Operations fund highlights. The previous budget was $344,991. The proposed operations fund budget is $321,300. That's not a significant decrease. We looked across each of our funds for throughout this whole year and trying to get ourselves proportionate to the new co-op and our new costs. And we got reasonably close with our transfer and with our rod costs, but the operations fund isn't decreased by nearly a proportionate amount. One thing to keep in mind, or one cause of that, would be that the last year's lease with 7-year one was $1, and this year it's $15,000. So if you were to have put that lease back into the budget, it would have made this year's decrease more. Certainly the cost of the lease is proportionate, down from, I think it was 46, is that about what our previous lease was? About 46,000 down to 15,000. The insurance rates went up despite us having fewer students. The way that we are rated, they look at, the carrier looks at the number of special education students in the co-op, so we submitted that new data with the reduced students, but despite that, the insurance rate actually went up. And this is something I'm going to explore this next year. It isn't easy to find carriers who will cover interlocal special education cooperatives. And so we were told that because of the pandemic and increasing in costs and all of the things that go with that was the driver with the increase in the rates. The other items on here are we are purchasing new phones. That's not a large expense, but that will be a one-time. We lowered the legal services significantly. We had increased that quite a bit last year because of the need for the reorganization costs associated with that. And then some costs with the operations fund just aren't able to be scaled down. And transportation, the costs that we fund are out of co-op costs. So transporting students to the blind school or the deaf school in Indianapolis. It just so happens that the students that we are transporting are in the current co-op and not some of the Warner Batesville students. And then copier lease and Neola are still needs that we have, so those weren't able to be scaled down. So that is, I guess that's a highlight of the operations fund. The operations fund is one of the tabs of the local fund. If you want to see those specific amounts, you can pull those up. Preschool local budget. The previous budget was $672,485. The proposed preschool budget is $398,500. This year we're going to start with 91 students in our special education preschool. As a reminder, and this is one I have to remind myself some, is when you look at the local budget, our preschool is funded differently than our school-aged. School-aged, our formula includes APC plus ADM from the total ADM of the school. Our preschool works differently. It does take the APC, but instead of an ADM count on the total student body, you have an ADM count solely based on the students in the preschool, which definitely makes this one more accurate in a way in terms of the service, paying for the number of students in the preschool, but it does add more fluctuations than the school age because if your students if you have more students in your preschool, then your preschool costs go up, and that is more tied directly to the school's paying for it, as opposed to the share across the co-op based on the overall ADM. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that super well, but preschool costs are based only on preschool student numbers. Just as an example, we're going to start the year, even though South Dearborn has more total students than, say, Lawrenceburg does. Lawrenceburg's going to start the year with more preschool students in South Dearborn. And so when you look at that tab on the local budget, you'll see those numbers different. And that also drives, when you look at the total participating shares, that also explains why some go up and some go down. And that's one factor. Things that are on the local preschool budget include the two preschool teachers, that's the teacher at Jacksonville and the teachers at Lawrenceburg, as well as the paraprofessionals in those programs. The South Dearborn teachers covered under the 619 grant, the other two are covered under the local preschool. The other items that are on this are the preschool coordinator and preschool speech services that the cooperative provides. All right, so the local non-public budget is also part of the local overall local budget. And what we do, and this is just a reminder or a review, is all of the APC funds that are generated by students with disabilities who are educated in non-public schools, we're required to spend those funds on those students. Just as a comparison, with Batesville has always been the school with the most non-public students for us. And so if you look at the total students with disabilities makeup of the cooperative, in previous year it was non-public students made up 3.6%. Going forward, they're going to make up 1.6% of the cooperative. So it's a pretty significant decrease, and that's reflected in the budget as well, that our previous non-public budget was $210,000, and that's going to drop just below $50,000. The services that we provide are the same. It's just to fewer schools, fewer students. So we will fund TOR and TOS services. We do proportionally have administrative costs, so that proportion does go down. And then we do fund the special education assessments when the students are evaluated in our school. Okay, so just to go a quick summary, and I put into the summary too just some proportions so that you will have those to think about. Our total special education population has increased by 4% in the co-op. The 611 grant increased by 1.9, almost 2%. The 619, which is the preschool, did not increase. The education fund reduced by 35%. The transfer line reduced by 33%. Transfer line being the costs that the schools have for their intense behavior and academic programs. Our operations fund only reduced by 18%. And we reduced local preschool by 41% and local non-public by 77%. I think this last bullet point is one that kind of is helpful to ground ground you all on how much of a reduction that is compared to the reduction in funding from the separating schools. But the separating districts accounted for 42% of the funding in last year's budget. So really it was only in the local preschool and then non-public where we were able to hit that number or exceed that number in a reduction, both in the transfer and in the ROD funds. We were able to make significant reductions, but we're not able to reduce it by the exact same amount as the separating districts had. I hope that makes sense. Maybe there's questions about that. We can go into balances anticipated starting this next school year. I put an asterisk next to the education fund. Marcia shared that we anticipate starting right about 1.5. I put in here starting at 1.3 because we do have the costs from the renovation to consider, and so that's really a more accurate starting point. And you also have the cash balances on the operations, and then because our preschool numbers have gone up over the last 2 years, we've actually been funding some of those costs out of the education. And so that fund is negative, just under $100,000. So there's the picture of where Rod stands starting this next school year. So I've provided some options to the board to consider. And this page has what our current participating shares were for 1920, and then some options for what participating shares would be for 2021. The first option would be to fully fund the cooperative without using any of the cash balance. Increases range from 3 to 16%, which is a pretty significant increase. The one thing I want to point out on this is, regardless of which option we take and how we want to use some of our cash balance, which I do believe we should, that at some point we have to keep in mind that the costs are what they are, and so we have to be mindful of that as we're planning for the future and having our discussions over the next school year on either interlocal agreement changes or what those things may be, but being mindful that we don't need to take this increase now, but at some point we have to consider taking the increase. But I certainly don't think we need to do that all in 1 year, not when we have a cash balance of 1.3 million. So I presented this budget option, but I also have a couple other options. The second would be to, if we looked at overall what did Rod receive in participating shares last year, and we did not ask for any kind of increase in total participating shares for this next school year. We have, and we would use cash balance here. There are changes, so it wouldn't be a flat amount. The reason there would be increases and decreases, even though overall it would be no increase, would be because of the changes in ABC and the movement in the preschool, and then the changes in your overall ADN. So districts that are growing, this would, even though this is flat, this is, you would see that increase. Districts that are going down in ADN, there would be a decrease. So even the funding option 2, which would be a flat funding option, no increase to schools, would have some individual changes to districts. So what would using funding option 2 mean for broad cash balance? That's what this slide shows. Is it would reduce the education fund to just under $1 million, and then it would cause a negative balance in the operation, and it would cause a negative balance in the preschool fund that you see here. So I have a third option to present, which would be which is a little bit of a hybrid of the first two, keeping the education fund at the same level that we funded it last year. So that would be working that education fund cash balance down, but at the same time, getting the operation fund and the preschool fund so that we would project zero balances on those at the end of this next school year. So that would mean, because we have a scrolling up here, because we have a $100,000 in operation, we could underfund that one by about that much, and then the preschool, we would have to then increase funding to get that one back to zero. And that is what option 3 would be. Again, the individual changes vary based on increasing and decreasing ADM and APC. And you can take a look at those numbers here. And here's what the projected cash balance would be at the end of the school year based on the funding option 3. This would allow us to also just look at that education fund to get into where we ultimately think you want that cash balance to be. So those are the funding options, and I'm going to end my show here and see if you have any questions and discussion about the presentation.
Alex, a question that I have is, so with that balance that you and Marcia are projecting at the 1.5 at the end of June, is that with all payouts and everything to Summit, Dearborn, and Batesville?
It does include, yes.
Okay, that's why I just want to make sure that it would be starting July 1 with what that should be with all payouts made. Are there questions that any board members have for Alex, specifically from his presentation or the 3 options that he's presented to us? Alex, I believe in the recommendations that you had a recommendation of which option to utilize. I believe your option was option 3 that you're recommending.
Yeah, I think option 3 it is a good option for a couple of reasons. I think we do have a healthy cash balance, and I think it's right and appropriate to utilize that. I think that there may be, I know we're looking down the road that there being potential, there are unknowns in terms of where funding is going to be in years next year and beyond. I think that having that 900,000 allows us to, again, next year also consider doing something similar to this year, so that we, depending on where that funding is, that we don't have to then take another all the way increase. I think that it's nice, for me, nice and clean to say we figure out where we want that cash balance to really ultimately be this school year, and then we're able to only look at that education fund and use that and the other 2 smaller funds, just plan on zeroing those out each year. So I think just conceptually, I like that idea, and I think we can use this next school year too to see, did we size ourselves appropriately? Did we have the right number of staff? And we'll be able to kind of come back and revisit where that ultimate balance you would like that to be in this next school year. So those are my reasons, I guess, for that, choosing that 3rd option.
Okay. Hearing the recommendation from Alex on funding option 3, first, are there any other questions for Alex? I didn't hear any earlier. Hearing that there's no questions for Alex, do I have a recommendation of which option? His recommendation was option 3. Do I have a recommendation for option 3 for the ROD budget for 2021?
I would make that motion, Ryan Middleton, Jacksonville.
Thank you, Ryan. I've got Ryan then making a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have Eric Lowe's from South Dearborn seconding the motion. So questions for Alex or Marcia?
This is Jane. I don't have a question, but I do want to take a moment to thank Marcia and Alex for their work on this budget. And I understand that we're taking a as you say, a hybrid approach or a bit of a compromise to try to be careful this first year. And I think that's wise for us. And then if we look back after a year, we can determine what changes we need to make going forward.
Thank you, Jane. And I agree that I think definitely we want to get those accounts zeroed out, the operations non-public preschool. We don't want to each year have a negative balance that we're trying to dig ourselves out of. So trying to get those zeroed out will help us then to be able to then plan for the future then too. And once they're zeroed out, then that's less funding we've got to worry about having to come up with for the future too. So hearing no other questions, again, also I want to echo Jane, Alex, Marcia, thank you for putting the budgets together and sharing this with us. All those in favor of funding option 3 for the 2021 school year, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. So it will be option number 3 will be the option. Okay, Alex?
Okay, thank you all.
That does move us on to discussion items. Moving on to discussion items, we have listed, the first one is update on Rod office relocation. Alex?
So as you can see, I'm not in my son in the office. I am in the choir room at Aurora Elementary School. And I want to first just start by thanking a couple of folks. I want to thank South Dearborn, Chris Tanner, Eric Lowe's, and the folks here at Aurora for giving us not only the space for the new Rod office, but also making available this temporary office. And I think one other name, Brian Sturgeon, has been a helpful person to be able to talk to on the phones and technology, which has been I think the most difficult part for us in the move is figuring out the internet and the phones and all of the pieces that they start talking RJ11 cords and things, and my eyes just kind of roll back, and I'm trying to understand it, but I think we're in pretty good hands between Brian and our guys in the Midwest. So that's just that. But update wise, hopefully maybe by the next board meeting we could do a little tour or something of the new space. It is coming along very well. Group is, I think, a little ahead of schedule. Some of the things that may be taking time are just getting door hardware and doors and things in. They have all the walls together. They have paint on the walls, and a lot of the electrical's done. Fixtures aren't in the bathrooms, but they are built in. They're plugged, so I'm pretty confident in a couple weeks we'll be able to start moving things out of the band room and moving them over to our space, which will be nice. So the addition, we did have to make a modification to the plans, I guess, that we first reviewed in and that's related to the technology phone side. So we didn't have in the original plans all of the drops that we would need for the Wi-Fi and the fax connections and those. So those were some additions that we made. I hope we are all the way done with that. They have installed the drops and things that we'll need for the Wi-Fi. But when we presented the bids, I guess, when the plans that were presented, those all were not added at that time. So those were some, I would think, for the most part, minor additions or changes to those plans. So that's good. If you are to call the Rod office, our number is the same. We are forwarding it right now to another number because we aren't live yet, but the Rod number is the same. We aren't hooked up to our fax, so you can't fax us anything, but email's still working. We have, and we're online and things here using South Dearborn's connections until we get our own up and running. So we're still accessible. Trying to think of anything else to update on. As far as the move out of Sunman, we're pretty well completely moved out. The only thing still at Sunman is the old phone system in the storage room, the switch, which we'll be removing, and the copiers have to be moved by the our office. All the furniture and things were moved. I got my steps in and helped with the movers and getting things out of there. So it was busy last week. It was a good busy week for us, but now we're half done. So yesterday, Marsha, I think she needed a fork for lunch, and I think it's somewhere buried in band room. So those little things, but those are not big problems. So everything's pointing in the right direction in terms of being able to be in and ready to go on August 1st. And if you come by, you might get roped into moving a desk or two. So be warned.
Good. Well, thank you, Alex. I do want to thank South Dearborn Schools and being able to make the accommodation in the kind of move a little bit early. And so thank you for being able to make that space, Eric. Please thank Chris and all of your staff for helping with that. I do want to thank the Rod staff too for all of those, Alex, Marsha, and all the other Rod staff in helping to make that move. So thank you to South Dearborn and the Rod staff for all of your assistance in that. Thank you. And it sounds like also, so kudos to Pool Group for being right now ahead of schedule and getting things done. So we're kind of excited, like Alex said, hopefully within the next couple weeks, they're hoping to be able to move in there where the time frame was at least by the end of July, but it looks like it could be a few weeks earlier than that. So do want to thank Pool Group then for making that happen as well. So thank you. Any questions or comments for Alex on the renovations or the move? Okay, then hearing none, that'll move on to the next discussion item, planning for special education programming when schools resume in the fall.
Oh, I've got so many questions and everybody has all the answers, right? You all have the answers. So, I know, one, that schools are still in the process of the details, right? I think the schools kind of getting some of the broad strokes, and you're still working on the detail. What I want to do is, I guess, throw in a couple things to consider and think about as you're coming up with those details, as well as I have a few questions, and then also just give you a little update on where we are on our planning on things. So the first, I have like a list of bullet points. So as you are making your plans final, you may have lists of essential visitors. Consider Rod. I think you would hope it would be essential visitors, but also if there are specific requirements that you're asking your staff to do or with your students, that we need to know those because we're going to do everything we can to keep consistent with your plan when we are in your buildings. Within that planning stage, we are going to be reaching out starting next week to each of the students who we know have medical fragile issues, and we're going to see where they are on things, whether they have doctor recommendations, what their needs are in terms of those students' reentry, because there may be some additional planning that we'll need you to do in terms of how to socially distance, or whether or not we need to rearrange some of the classrooms. It just depends. I think with a lot of these students, it's going to be very student-led in terms of what their needs are. Not a lot of kids, so I think that's a good thing that we can be very individualized with. But I want you to know that that's something we're going to be working with your teachers to reach out to those families and get some. The guidance that we've gotten is space. We're going to discuss with our staff about continuing to doing virtual meetings and doing a lot of distance things when appropriate. So I think IEPs, I was really impressed. I mean, even this meeting we're having now, with how much ground you can cover doing distance meetings. And I think our staff, I don't want us to be the link where we're in all of your buildings and sharing and being sources of spread or being sources for our folks to be exposed to not just one building or one group, but everybody's group. And so we're going to keep that as an emphasis, is doing the hangouts and virtual meetings. And so that'll probably be a hybrid from what it was in the fall. So if you have these conference rooms, those need to be wired and set up to be able to do. And I think most of them probably already are, but it's something to think about, making sure that there are the ability to do virtual meetings. One example is some of you have these conference rooms that have pretty big tables. It would be very helpful to have a centralized speaker mic so that individuals in that room can all hear and speak to anyone participating virtually, instead of having a grouping of computers around the desk where everybody has separate mics. So those are little things, but it's just something to think about, is where in the building would you do virtual meetings, because I think that's still something that we would be prioritizing. I believe, I don't know if all of our schools are going to be offering a virtual academy or an online education option, but I'm sure that some are offering online, and it sounds, just from my reading, that there's an enrollment piece to that. So parents have to decide to enroll a student into an online or in person. We are going to prioritize community case conferences right away for any student who is enrolling in a virtual option. So that's something I will need help with, is identifying any student that has an IEP that enrolls in a virtual option. We're going to support your school and your teachers on getting that case conference done and figuring out, I know that's a huge unknown in terms of numbers and how those kids are going to be serviced in general, but then we have to also provide special education. And so we'll need to, we redid all of our IEPs this spring, but those weren't really anticipating students being virtually enrolled. So if they're doing virtual enrollment, we'll have to redo each of those IEPs. So I'm envisioning, Mason and I talked about this, at sometime really early in August, once we've gotten a little bit of knowledge on where kids are, statuses, instead of doing our annual admin training, to do more block training with your schools, and not so much training, but more planning. So we'll cover the training pieces that we always do in terms of the special education do's and don'ts with admins. But then I think we'll need to discuss, okay, you've got 4 students with IEPs who chose virtual options, and we just put our heads together and figure out how we're going to provide that special education. Because it may not work to say the teacher who is their natural TOR can provide that service, because they've got all of their in-person students. And there may be a role for the cooperative if there's just a couple kids across each district, to identify one teacher that works with kids across districts. But I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that, because we don't know the number of kids and what kids are going to be enrolled in a program situation like that. So, but that's something we will certainly explore. Okay, kind of looking down my list. If you have planning documents or things that you're going to provide from on the staff end, so what the expectation is for, you've got a fever, or however you're doing with your staff, if you would share that with me, because we're going to come up up with something too, but then we also have to look, well, how do we kind of balance what we come up with what is expected in schools? So I know that the state has some kind of guidance, and maybe we're all going to be pretty close anyway, but if you have staff guidance on kind of like the I don't know if that's like human resource kinds of things, but if you're going to have people, hey, if you've got a fever, we're going to send you home, that kind of thing, that you're putting out the staff, if you share that with me so I can make sure my staff know, and we can be consistent with what our districts are doing. One thing is, I know there's PPE is a discussion. Okay, Ryan, thank you. If there's different things with PPE, I wanted to put something on your radar for your CPI teams, is to have some specific PPE available for your CPI teams. I think that is probably includes face shields. And not that they would necessarily have them, but I think that if you're doing a 30-minute restraint with a student because they're out of control, that means there's no socially distancing in that situation. And so it might be something where you can have discussions with your CPI teams, and we could be part of that, but I think that there's probably another layer of PPE for CPI teams. Let's see if I've got any other mention. Okay, so I think that covers those. The only other thing would be if we're going to encourage our staff to really schedule themselves well so that they're not going to all of the buildings in a single day, that they are keeping to districts, and just like we're trying not to be around as many people all at one, try to restrict movement of students and staff and that sort of thing, which is going to be very difficult. But one thing is, if we can identify some workplaces in your districts, then there would be the ability for staff to stay, if they're assigned to Lawrenceburg, then they're going to work in Lawrenceburg, and they're not going to then come over to Aurora. And if Aurora has to then close the building down, then I know those are just things that I'm thinking about. Is are we going to be able to? I think we're different than Aurora, and I'm sure we can still have our staff come to our office. But then it may be good to be able to just have somebody reporting only to the building that they're working as well. So that's something that I'd love to explore, is some workspaces in your districts. And I think we have some already in some. But it's a little more challenging in others. So that's another thing to be, I guess, thinking about, is workspaces for broad folks. I don't think there was really questions there. It's just a ton of things. I think we'll revisit this in our July board meeting for sure, because we'll get a lot more details there.
Good. No, that was a lot of good information for us to be thinking about, Superintendents. Just kind of with, like you said, our CPI teams, talking about letting our principals know that as we start to look at planning, if we have those virtual students, then Rod's thinking reconvene those IEP case conferences then when school starts, to start kind of talking about discussing services. So all that. Alex, I'll get with you afterwards. I've got a contact for Shield, so I should have thought about it. I'll try to see if I can get some shields that would cover your staff then too. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we are. I did buy a few because, like, our SLPs is one. I guess that's another one. If you may need to talk with your speech pathologists because they're going to work real closely with kids, and they can't wear a mask because you can't articulate with your mouth. You may be able to use a clear mask, but that's something that, like with our deaf hard of hearing teacher, we purchased the face shield because that muffled voice is not helpful. And so there may be kids that if your teachers are wearing masks and they've got that student in their class, we may need to come up with a different option for that. So we did buy a few for our staff, and we have some masks and things. But yeah, I'm interested in the context. So yes, thank you.
Okay. Are there any specific questions that anyone has for Alex specific to kind of planning for fall reentry?
I have one, Carl.
Okay, Noel has a question, Alex.
Just with the ROD early year training, such as admin, new teacher training, the CPI, is that gonna all be virtual, or are we gonna, what are we gonna?
So Alex, you are thinking then that all of that, as you kind of shared with doing an August block training by corporations, are you thinking that'll be virtual as well?
Yeah, I think virtual, though you bring up a great point though on CPI training. There's a component of that we can do virtual. I will have to look, though. I don't think we can do the physical part training virtual. So we may be really busy doing some small groups, because it would probably be better to do small groups with that than how we've done it in the past, which is scheduling a few days and bringing everybody in. So that's a great point, Noel. I'm gonna have to look into it and talk with my trainers on how we can do that. But all the other trainings that Rod's doing, we're gonna try to do everything virtual.
Yeah, so you'll send out information in July about trying to schedule with each corporation or building for new teacher and admin. You'll get those.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. Thank you. Other questions or comments for Alex? No, well, I appreciate everyone joining. I don't know that we have anything else. Let me check and see. I don't know if there's any chat sessions, if anyone had questions. I know that it shows that we have 6 that are watching. Let me walk over to the computer and double check and see if we had any comments or questions. Comment box. Was there a comment? Chat box?
Yeah, but there's no
Oh, you want to? Okay, so there's- yeah.
Is Jim giving me homework? We printed some stuff.
Alex, Randy, my IT, he's been watching the chat box, and there's no chatter in the chat box, so there's no questions there from the public or anything. So thank you, Randy, for monitoring that for me while we're here. Is there any other topics that anyone needed to add? If not, we'll adjourn, and then still, if somebody wants to ask kind of just a roundtable question, we kind of ask some general roundtable questions. But anything for the ROD meeting? Okay, then hearing none, then we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 10:11 at this time. And only question I really had roundtable while I was going to ask, I know Jane just had to drop off, but vendors, and I can send an email out to others, but does Eric, have you guys, or at Batesville, do you know what vendor you're using for your hand sanitizer? Have you made that decision?
I think we're still exploring different vendors here at Batesville.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, we're the same.
Okay, because that's what I want to try and get something this week to start making, or we've got about 3 different vendors we're kind of comparing, and I didn't know if others had pinpointed on who they were going with. Do you know if Brandon has? Okay. So we'll take a look at that. I'll send an email out that way if others have kind of settled on that, because we want to try and get something, especially with that July 6th reentry for athletes and stuff. I want to try and get something in the buildings near weight rooms and gyms. So I want to get that going. So, okay, I'll send an email out to all those in the ROD. That way, Paul and Andrew and those and Jane who dropped off, then they can always jump in and add something. So, any other just general questions or comments?
Eric, that does bring up with we've done hand sanitizers and things, and we always try to do consistent with what the school is. So, and like the soap and things is part of the lease, you know, and make sure we're going to the bathroom. But yeah, if there's certain
depending upon if you're going portable or installed on walls and things like that, then that way, yeah, probably that consistency.
Right, yeah.
Okay, great. Noel, anything?
No.
You all right? Noel's okay. Eric, okay?
Yeah.
Good, Lynn? Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, Lynn. Lana, I see Lana jumped in here to the meeting at the end. I know you're muted. Anything you wanted to share? No? Okay. Then, hearing none, then we'll go ahead and we will end the meeting. So we'll go ahead and stop the recording and everything. So thank you, Randy, for helping us today. Alex, if you can stay on for just a second, I'll kind of share a couple things, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
It's ended.